introduce the great crew from Matagami First Nation that we've got here today. And clearly when the star of the show arrives, Chief Jennifer, will have her join us on stage and we'll dive right into the panel questions. All right, so at the far end of the stage here, we've got Tim Harvey. Maybe wave to the crowd there, Tim. And he's the CEO of Matagami Aki. That's the business arm that's owned by Matagami First Nation, so he does a lot of work with our mining partners. And beside him, we've got Chelsea DeBastos. She's the IBA coordinator, a lands coordinator, energy champion, and probably wears a couple different hats as well in the lands department. As some of you already know, most of our lands departments are pretty tapped out and most people wear multiple hats. Beside Chelsea is her beautiful sister, Brandy DeBastos, who is actually the executive director of executive administrator. I think she's selling herself short because she probably makes sure that a lot of things get done at Matagami Aki as well. And then we've got our spot saved for Chief. Beside this empty chair here, we've got Trent Thomas. So he's really nervous about being here, but he really shouldn't be because he's really an up-and-coming star of the community is what I like to call him. So Trent is actually president of the Youth Council. He's very, very involved within the community, and he's always got some kind of project that he's working on, especially with the youth in the community. He just recently released a small, short little documentary. It's available on YouTube. You guys should really Google and check it out. He's the one that put that together on himself. So. And beside him is Devin Naviu. He is the CFO of Matagami Aki, and he is also a council member. So I've been at the Waban Tribal Council now for about 6 years, and I have to say that I've really been privileged to work very closely with the crew at Matagami, and they've really become my friends more than anything. They're not just, colleagues at this point. So big thank you very much for the crew to agreeing to sit through this with me and to come up with my idea of two-eyed seeing and kind of running with that and agreeing to be on the panel with me today. So just moving on now, before we dive right into the questions about the two-eyed seeing panel and all of that, and before I even introduce what two-eyed seeing is, I would like to give a little bit of a history of Matagami First Nation, just to familiarize ourselves with the community a little bit more. So clearly, since time immemorial, Matagami has long been home to the Anishinaabe and Oji-Cree people from the Matagami River area. The First Nation is located on the northwest side of the beautiful Matagami Lake. It really is a beautiful, beautiful community. If you haven't already been there, if you have the opportunity, please head out and have a look. It's a gorgeous place to be. So before the arrival of European settlers, the Anishinaabe and Oji-Cree maintained a life based on the land where they thrived through hunting, fishing, trapping, and gathering. On July 7th of 1906, Treaty 9 was signed by Matagami members Andrew Luke, who signed with a simple X, and Joseph Shemaket, Thomas Chicken, and James Neveu, who wrote their names in syllabics. Andrew Luke then became the first recognized chief of Matagami First Nation under Treaty 9 and the imposed Indian Act. Matagami First Nation is an Anishinaabe First Nation band government in the Canadian province of Ontario, clearly, situated along the Matagami River, as I indicated earlier. The First Nation members of the community primarily live on Matagami 71 Reserve in the Sudbury district near Gogama. The on-reserve population is approximately 200 residents and clearly growing. And there's approximately about 1,000 members that make up part of Matagami First Nation. Oh. And of course, I'm forgetting my slides as we were going through. So here's a picture that Chief Jen was awarded, and here she comes now. She was awarded the Women in Mining Sudbury Chapter Award in the fall of last year. And a big contingent of us did gather out there and were able to help celebrate with her. So I'll just give her a moment as she's coming up. Sorry, Chief, we don't have a red carpet for you, though, unfortunately. Over here, Chief. There's stairs here. Yeah. It's all good. Welcome, welcome.
Thank you.
Great. The star of the show's arrived. Again, so introducing to you now Chief Jennifer Constant of Matagami First Nation. She really is a strong and innovative leader. She's really focused on, building growth for the community, and she's got a really great relationship and encouragement from the youth in the community. She's very well respected. So thank you for joining us, Chief. So I was just diving in. We introduced Matagami a little bit. We introduced the crew. And now I'm going to introduce the concept of two-eyed seeing. So I've had a lot of people ask me what exactly is two-eyed seeing? What does it mean? So as I alluded to earlier, I do have a background in biology, and I've been on pretty much every mine site in the Timmins area. I've sampled something, whether it be turtles or butterflies or fish or water or you name it, I've been around here. And in my career in education, it came very clear to me that there are different perspectives in the world, and that Western way of thinking and the scientific mindset is not the only way of really looking at the world and the interconnectedness of it in front of us. So really, two-eyed seeing is also known as Ituaptimuk in Mi'kmaq. It is a guiding principle that encourages intercultural collaboration by bringing together Indigenous and Western perspectives. It means to see from one eye with the strengths of Indigenous knowledges and ways of knowing, and from the other eye with the strength of Western knowledges and ways of knowing, and to clearly use both of these eyes together for the benefit of all. Now, this approach recognizes that beneficial outcomes are much more likely when multiple perspectives are considered. Some key aspects of two-eyed seeing now are clearly multiple perspectives. So it promotes the understanding that different worldviews can offer valuable insights. There's respect and reciprocity. So the two-eyed seeing concept emphasizes the importance of honoring and valuing diverse knowledge systems without one dominating the other. Clearly, there are beneficial outcomes, so it suggests that when multiple perspectives are considered, more beneficial outcomes are likely, and therefore more people can kind of be happy. It's more of a win-win type situation. And of course, it encourages the practical application of knowledge from both Indigenous and Western sources to address challenges and achieve desired results. So we can see the concept of two-eyed seeing being applied in different contexts. One of education, so integrating Indigenous knowledge and Western science into the educational curricula. Healthcare, so providing culturally responsive and holistic healthcare services to Indigenous peoples. In research, conducting research that respects and incorporates Indigenous knowledge and methodologies, very important. And I do have a case example that I'll talk to about some of my time working in northwestern Ontario and doing some fisheries studies. I guess I may as well get to it right now. Maybe the scientists that were sent up there to sample fish should have listened to the Indigenous community elders in understanding that there's a lot more fish up there than you're used to seeing, and so you may want to reduce your catch effort so you're not stuck counting fish overnight. So that's just one example of how two-eyed seeing can actually come and provide some beneficial outcomes. Another context that it can be applied in is obviously policy and governance. So developing policies that do reflect both Indigenous and Western perspectives. Clearly, with environmental stewardship, it's a very important concept, applying Indigenous knowledge and Western science to address environmental solutions or challenges and come up with very unique, out-of-the-box thinking type solutions. In therapy and counseling, the concept can also be applied for creating culturally safe therapeutic spaces where clients feel valued and respected. And by embracing two-eyed seeing, we cultivate a more inclusive and collaborative approach to problem solving, leading to more equitable and sustainable outcomes. So I hope I've done a decent job of introducing the concept of two-eyed seeing. The reason I opted for this topic this year is really wanting to highlight that when it comes to mining and jobs in the mining industry or careers in the mining industry, you're not always necessarily going to be going underground, right? There's a lot of different career opportunities and jobs that are available on surface that support the industry either directly or indirectly. And being a little biased and seeing that I've worked in the environmental field for a good 13 years prior to working at Waubin, I encourage any of our community members or anybody that's really interested in, keeping the environment safe and understanding what mining actually is all about, where the risks are, where the liabilities actually are, things that come with that. Well, get involved. Get involved with the environmental departments, get out there, get your boots dirty, get out on the ground and see what it's all about. So that's why I opted for this topic this year, was just to highlight that there's a lot of opportunity within the mining industry for different perspectives to be applied. Now, without further ado, are we ready to jump into our panel questions? Excellent. So you guys have something to kind of look at while we're just having discussions. Again, I wanted to allude to the photography from our IBA coordinator, David Courtois. So I'm going to flip through this slideshow here and hopefully be able to put it on a loop. So it'll just play on a loop as we're going through and we're having our discussion here. Try to limit how many things I'm trying to do all at once. Mm-hmm. There. So if Jamie wasn't lying to me, our awesome audio-visual gentleman at the back there, if he's not lying to me, this will be on a loop every 15 seconds.
There you go.
Excellent. And so everybody knows I did provide these questions to our panelists ahead of time. We had a few discussions, but I've really left it up to them to answer how they see. There is no right or wrong answer. We just want to have a little fun conversation and really kind of see what the different perspectives are shared here in Metagami First Nation. So, and this is for no one in particular. If anybody wants to answer, feels comfortable answering, please feel free to do so. So the first question for our panelists is, how would you define the concept of two-eyed seeing?
Any takers?
I can start, if that's okay. So thank you, everyone, for joining us here today. It's really nice to see that everyone's taking that first step towards Indigenous engagement. But my idea of two-eyed seeing is actually combining two different worldviews together and coming to, a balance, because one worldview, our Western worldview, is very industry-focused. It's short-term life of mine, whereas when we're looking at our Indigenous holistic side, we're looking at long-term. We're thinking that way far ahead, 7 generations ahead. So finding that balance, one side is very short-term, the other is thinking long-term and how we can sustain the land for generations to come. Thank you.
Yeah, and I can add to that, Brandy, as well. Like you hit it right on the head, but like another whole part of that would be just keeping an open mind and listening. A lot of times you're in a room and your perspectives are a lot different. So like, how do you bridge that gap? It's a lot of open mindfulness, communication, direct dialogue, and the willingness to listen and to learn and to understand to who you're speaking with, and vice versa, right?
Excellent.
I don't know if this is on. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
So first of all, thank you for your patience. I assumed it started at 10, so I was mad dashing it here. My vehicle might get towed, but we'll see what happens. So from my perspective, I've always been in a two-eyed seeing mode, right? When you grow up Indigenous, you are taught a very different set of values, a very different set of ways of being, that anything that you do, you have to factor in the consequences of that, but also that you have to respect, I guess, the laws that we have in place about the fact that we don't view ourselves independent of our environment. We are not that. We are interdependent. So if we are going to cause any kind of destruction around us, that ultimately means we're doing that to ourselves. So from that perspective, navigating, and you'll hear it out there. You'll hear people, even in my own community, that are absolutely, adamantly opposed to any development in our territory, because it doesn't align with our ways of being. Now, for the past 100 or so years, extractive industry has been in our territory. And for much of that history, we have not had any participation. In fact, you know, and I'm not going to dive deep into the history of First Nations, but, you know, we occupied our lands and we were the eyes that made sure things were okay in our territory. A big part of why the reserve systems exist is to remove us from our lands so that we don't have that advocacy role that is inherent to who we are as First Nations people. And in that history, there's been a lot of development, especially in the north, and especially in my people's territory. And if you listen to any of the elders or anybody in our community, they will tell you that we should have been involved in any of this stuff. And I'm not just talking from a monetary perspective or a compensatory perspective, but the fact that, you know, it's like someone hanging onto your hand and saying, oh, I'm going to do this. And you're going to pull your hand away and say, what are you doing? Like, this is my hand. You can't, it's not independent. Like, you can't just take it and assume I'm not going to miss it. You're not going to do anything to it and not expect that I'm going to not be impacted. So I think from that perspective, you know, we are not opposed to commerce. We've always had that in our history. We recognize that we don't hold within our territory all of the things that we need to function. So trade and commerce existed all across the Americas. And so we're not opposed to that. We're actually well versed on it. And it's the exclusion, not just of ourselves as a nation or as a people, but also our perspectives of how to do things in a much more sustainable manner, in a way that, you know, is factoring in, as Brandy mentioned, the impacts, and that we understand fully how we are going to, I guess, reconcile or go on with knowing those things. So I think if that gives some perspective, that would be my comment to that. Miigwech.
So similar to what Brandy said, it's about finding balance and using both lens to make stronger decisions, especially when it comes to our water and community well-being. But it also means that companies can still meet their goals, but they do it while learning and listening to us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mic check.
Okay. I mean, just to add on, what everyone's been talking about and share a little bit more perspective. This is what this is all about, right? Sharing perspective, seeing things through different lenses. And, with Indigenous people, one of the big things that is foundational to us is trying to live a balanced life, whether that be that, mentally, spiritually, emotional, and so on and so forth. But often when, factoring the two-eyed seeing concept, it's, trying to balance those Western view and then Indigenous that view as well. And, it's great, but sometimes it could also be very difficult to try to balance that. And just to add that to everyone's, I guess, points here today, especially within the mining industry, I feel like that's one of the most difficult scenarios to try to factor in a two-eyed seeing concept.
Thank you, everyone. These are excellent responses. So our next question for our panelists is, and we've kind of already touched on that, what does the concept of two-eyed seeing mean to you as an Indigenous community member? So maybe you've kind of already spoken to that, meaning you were raised blending different perspectives, right? So we'll move on to the next question for our panelists then, is do you have any examples of how the concept of two-eyed seeing is applied within the community? Does it play a role in the development of relationships with industry?
Any example? I think responsible harvesting is one that you can see, and that the care is not just something that sounds nice and cute, that it actually genuinely is there. So I'll use the example of fishing. People pride themselves on the ability and the catches and all of that stuff, but they also, in Matagami, also have a genuine concern about the population of the fish. So collaboratively as a nation, in that particular example, the desire was there to put back. So our community really put together a wonderful program for developing a fish hatchery for the community. And our members care so much about it that they actually also invested in having a small hatchery in the school for the students to be able to learn and participate in. And it's not something that is just run by a select few people. It's when things are ready to go back in the lake, it is a community effort, and you'll see that whoever is helping with the fish hatchery will go and say to the school, typically it's Tim or Devin or anyone in the Aki side usually will be like, okay, let's get all the fish going, let's invite the school, let's go release the fish in different locations, or the fry, I should say. And the sense of pride, but also that giving back aspect and how much people actually care about it is something that resonates with that cultural value in our community. So that's one example. I don't know if anybody has any other.
Yeah, and just to add to that, Jen, I was fully involved in the micro hatchery, but just the explanation to the MNR and the different ministry officials, the answer was absolutely no right off the bat. And it took a whole team, it took leadership at the time to explain that, no, these are the values and this is what we're doing. And the rules don't matter in this particular context because it was a different situation, right? It was a community trying to replenish a tributary in the proper way. So they came down, they checked it out. Everybody learned. We learned a lot about the regulations. They learned about a traditional way of doing things, and ultimately, it's an ongoing program. They support it. So that was a really good example of a two-eyed seeing.
Yeah, I can just jump in here. So from my perspective, I mean, most of my time is spent within, Metagami, Aki, and so I'll shed a little bit of light on that from a business perspective. Traditionally, maybe Westernly, in that one eye, one view, you're really focused on developing your business, focusing on your bottom line. Well, on the community perspective, we're really focused on a generational approach, because one of the big factors specifically with the mining industry, and the mining industry is obviously the major economic driver within our territory, and we realize that, but we also, have to understand that, when, for instance, signing an IDA, for instance, that's an impact benefit agreement, and there's benefits for the impacts to the land. So when we're taking this approach from a business perspective, we have to understand that, us as community members are going to be living with the impacts to the land for generations, and we have to ensure, from the economic development perspective, that these benefits are also generational, because we understand that there's only so much in our territory that could be developed, and so we need to really have that perspective and that lens on when making decisions and participating within industry.
Yep, especially in the mining industry. Sorry, Brian. Like the outcomes are usually a lot different. The project is the same. It's a mine. It's a whatever mine it is, but the outcomes are different. For the mining operation, it's to extract as much resources effectively and efficiently as you can, make the most dollars. I mean, there's environmental considerations, all the considerations are in there. But for the community does not care how many grams of gold are pulled out of the ground. They're looking at that mine is going to open doors, it's going to open opportunities, it's going to build up the community, it's going to allow us to grow at the same rate as the surrounding world. So it's to balance those two and to come to a mutual understanding in the middle. The outcomes are different. So there's a lot of learning and understanding and I wouldn't say compromise, but rethinking things to make sure that they work properly.
That's great. Yeah, so just to add to that, just on an Indigenous perspective, we are relationship people. We like to build relationships first before we advance on any type of big projects. And with that comes ally and allyship. So for us to build our community and the way it has built, it's because we built great relationships with partners in industry, and that we're able to support the development within the community because of that. Thank you.
So an example I could share is when our youth council got the opportunity to meet with the Mineral Exploration Research Center. So we gathered in a teepee to talk about mineral exploration. They shared their work through a Western science lens, and we shared our connection to the land through an Indigenous lens. So it was a really great discussion on how they can work with our community better and what matters most to us when it comes to land.
And just to add to all of that, as an industry or as proponents, you're coming into a territory and, regardless of what the deposits are, you're only here temporarily. We aren't going anywhere. This is our territory, this is our land, this is what we have been tasked to take care of, and the impacts that Councillor Devon had mentioned, that's the footprint that we're left with when industry leaves. And anything, obviously a lot of you know about mining, that's the whole reason you're here today. Any disruption to the territory, doesn't leave it in a pristine state. And there's a lot of negative views about, First Nations need to be included or their impacts have to be measured. Well, yeah, they do have to, because we're the ones that are going to be left with this to care for and tend to. And we have no other option. We have to be able to sit and make those inroads and have those types of discussions to make sure that our views are factored in. And anybody who knows anything about mining knows that 100 years ago, the way people were mining did not factor in anything to do with environment or, any of those types of perspectives. And now that that industry is much more open to that, I'd say, it only makes sense to include that Indigenous view, because it's a win-win at the end. You're looking at things that are going to be developed in a sustainable way, that you're going to be able to use Indigenous knowledge to be able to, make a project more sustainable. And that's a better perspective to be having when doing these type of activities on the land.
And just to add to that too, like what you were saying, how people are here temporarily, we like to use the term visitors because you are here temporarily on our land. But yeah, we'd like to approach the engagement well in advance before exploration starts, because although we're working with timelines from the mine and extraction, we're thinking way far ahead, like how it's going to affect our children, our grandchildren, their children. So the process is way past, even though the life of the mine, say, is 75 years, we're thinking way further than that. So that's why some of the engagement takes a lot longer.
One other thing too is like these deposits, they were there and they were known about hundreds of years prior to now anyway. Like the communities have done a good job protecting the land and keeping those areas sacred. They were well aware about the deposits. And like you mentioned, like 100 years ago, mining practices were a lot different. You can visibly see that now. It's pretty ugly, to be honest with you. I mean, another 50 years is going to go by. We're going to be making jokes about the way we're mining today. It's going to be a lot better. So, like, no, it's 100% the community's responsibility to keep those areas safe, as safe as they can, and allow the proper people to come in and do it properly when it makes sense. But if it doesn't make sense and it's not going to be done properly, no, it should be protected.
So what I'm hearing is the theme of the concept of 7 generations, looking 7 generations back and honoring your ancestors, and looking forward, and not just 50 years or 100 years, looking 7 generations ahead is a big concept, and it is really related to two-eyed seeing in this forum. So now I'm wondering, and we've kind of touched a little bit on some of maybe the pushback from some of the community members, but I'd like to hear from the youth more specifically. Have you ever faced opposition from maybe other community members for participating in the industry? Do you have any, let's say, environmental monitors that have difficulty working on a mine site, based on the views from some of their family members potentially? And could you speak to that?
So we're not really faced backlash directly, but mostly hearing people's concerns about the mines and being that messenger to the industry. I don't know how to elaborate on that, but like being able to sit down in the meetings and listening to the community, having the community engagements, and being able to bring that to the industry and voice those concerns.
It's definitely a tough spot to be in, right? Between a rock and a hard place.
Yeah.
You want to honor your teachings and your family, but you also want to participate in today's, economy. So understandably, I have a little story to share there as well. So when I was still working for Blue Heron Environmental, I was actually doing some training some of the monitors out at the Borden mine. And it was something that the student I was training really, really struggled with a lot. Was her grandmother was adamant, like she was almost going to disown her for going to work at the mine. And all she was trying to do was be the eyes and ears for the community on the mine site. Not that there's anything extra scary about Borden. Borden's actually a really great, nice, good, clean mine. But just it really affected that young student, wanting to participate and work. And I still think about it to this day. I don't really know. I'd love to know how, through the years she was able to deal with that. And I'm sure it's through a lot of conversation, open conversation with her community. And sometimes you just have to agree to disagree. Did anybody have any other examples on how difficult it is sometimes with the different perspectives?
I'll add, but just for the sound guy, can you check to see if the last microphone is working? I don't want to stifle Devin in case he wants to jump in into anything. So I think even from our own perspective, from a First Nations lens, you know, again, we did have commerce. We were curious people. That's how we, you know, evolved and came to be and all of that other stuff. So I get that people care, and I get that people are adamantly opposed. And part of that is because of the lack of involvement, the absolute exclusion of First Nations. And again, you know, the whole reserve system exists because of that, putting us in a box and removing us from our land, removing us from advocacy, removing us from our rightful roles on the land. So I understand that perspective because it does seem harsh when you see what is happening, and that there hasn't been inclusion, there hasn't been discussion, I guess in a more recent historical perspective. So I do get it, and I love that people love to advocate in that way. That is just an example of that caretaker role for the land. And it's no different than anybody else who is an outdoor enthusiast, except that they have that direct lineage to our territory. So from that perspective, I get it. And some of the other people may not hear it as much, but I get the brunt of it from people. So, and especially social media. It's such a horrible place. It's wonderful at the same time. But, you know, we're able to have those type of conversations with our members because, you know, I know Nicole was mentioning the whole Trailblazer Award, and as flattered as I am for receiving that, and I do know that it is part of my role in that area, but it wasn't exclusively or solely my role in the historical kind of context of metogamy. You know, everybody, if you speak to anybody, especially our elders, they'll tell you, like, nobody should be on our land without our involvement. Nobody should be taking anything. And then they revert back to talking about treaties and about how things were supposed to be shared and how things were supposed to be discussed, and that, you know, neither, like, that was a relationship that the intent was there, but it just was completely ignored and neglected. So yeah.
Just to add to that, Chief, like I've experienced that quite a bit, just being the messenger for a lot of projects, whether they're forestry, mining. But I found it kind of stems down to people not being heard or felt like they're being heard, or a lot of times, not every time, but quite a bit of that and they never have been heard, right? And now they're an elder, and they've been saying the same things for 80 years, and nobody's listened, and they've seen the forestry operations go a bit sideways, and they have seen some mining things maybe not go the right way, and they're still trying to say the same thing, and they're still not being heard, right? So I can see the frustration, and now they're done trying to educate people, and they're just telling people to stop and get out of the bush. And I agree as well, but we have had a lot of success, like not singling out anybody, but just making room for them to have the conversation. It might not be in a community engagement where it's short time frame, but maybe a separate meeting where somebody can explain something for a longer period of time. But we have seen that helped. But it's listening, it's learning, it's the evolution of things. But we're seeing a lot of progress.
I guess I can add to that too. So I guess when you're taking an elder that's been through the system and like the recent colonial history, and you're asking them to trust industry and government to make decisions for them, it puts them at a place where they've trusted before and they've been let down. So really taking that into consideration, that yes, we need to do our part in the engagement and give them reassurance that some of the decisions we're making are for the best interest for them as well. But yeah.
I just reiterating the fact that, you know, again, this is about relationships and balance and understanding. That's the starting point right there. And, you know, from the community perspective, from the leadership side, like for us, it's our job to, you know, really be out there and communicate and work with folks to present as much information, especially when there's something new at the table. And that's the only way, like I said, it starts with that relationship and information sharing, and from there you could then build on that, and, you know, then comes that trust factor, which is, I think, one of the key pieces of trying to move forward.
Absolutely. So we are certainly hearing how it's so important to engage early, build trusting relationships, right? It's not kind of just come in, it's not a checkbox exercise of consultation. You're coming into community and you're building real relationships that are going to carry forward. And that's really what, you know, Matagami has focused on, and that's why Matagami can really see so many successes with using that approach. So thank you for sharing your views on that. We'll move on to the next question, still clearly in line with the two-eyed seeing. So what advice do you have for anyone who wants to learn more about two-eyed seeing, and how can it be used when engaging with Matagami?
I think, you know, as human beings, our natural inclination is just to learn and to be open to that. I would hope that gone are the days where people just have a view that, oh, we don't need to include Indigenous people or First Nations people. You know, being ignorant is not a commendable trait. And we all have such a wonderful time period to be existing in where you can access information so readily that from our perspective, as a First Nation, we make no secret about the process that we engage in. Because for so long we were excluded, and then people coming back and making it seem like we were the problem. Well, we don't know what you guys want. We don't know this. We can have that very open conversation. We make nothing a secret. We've even tasked yourself, Nicole, and the Tribal Council to say this is our process of what we expect when you're coming into our territory, looking at the potential of a project. And I'm speaking from a very, you know, mining perspective or project perspective, that we make no secret about how it is to go about having that relationship and fostering it. That doesn't mean you just show up at the band office and, you know, expect to meet with us, but, you know, there's ways to introduce yourself, to start establishing that relationship. And again, we are not a business. We are not an industry. You are in our yard, you are in our homes, and, you know, you're looking to develop projects, and we expect to have that respect afforded to us just by virtue of having that perspective. So, you know, while you may meet some people who don't like anybody, you get that in every society. For the most part, you know, if you are coming into our territory and looking at developing projects, you know, we're open to meeting you. We want to meet you. We want to see that your values align with ours. And if they don't, then we need to have a conversation about how we can get that kind of more aligned. And, you know, if things do move forward, just in terms of your projects, that, you know, our lens is applied as much as possible. We're not here to try and deter people from, you know, making your business prosperous. We're not opposed to that. We recognize that that is the whole reason you're here. But we do expect to be included in the conversation, and that, you know, certain elements have to adhere to some of the things that we'd like to see. And I don't think that any of those things are unreasonable. We have a great group of wonderful technical people that work for our First Nation, and I guess even for our Tribal Council. And, you know, we're trying to make it as easy as possible, because we also are very busy doing all of our own things, that we need a process that works, that is understood, and that I don't want to say makes it easier, but makes it less of a headache for even us to be able to go through. So that, you know, I can tell you from a historical perspective, when industry started coming into our territory, it was a very reactive kind of position from us because we were already busy dealing with a lot of the social issues like housing, education, all of those things, that when industry started really coming in to look at different projects, we had to take ourselves away from those advocacy roles and really immerse ourselves into stuff. So we did a lot of advocacy for funding so that we can put that into a hub. And I wanted to add this, and I know it's a little bit out of the conversation, but because of that work and because of our desire to make a more formal type of process, the chiefs and Waban Tribal Council really did a lot of advocacy to help make things more of a process driven that was factoring in all of our views or ways of being. And, you know, they were very successful in advocating for funding for Lands and Resources Department. So across Canada now, you see First Nations being better equipped to be able to house traditional knowledge, to be able to meet with industry, or be able to just get more organized. And again, the Mineral Development Advisory funding being in place. So there's work that has happened directly in the Timmins area, directly with our First Nations, that have benefited not just the Timmins area and the proponents that are coming into our territory looking for development, but it's actually broader reaching and has had a positive impact for First Nations across Canada. And that's something that Waban is very, very humble about. But, you know, they did do quite a great job to be able to help First Nations build capacity in that area. So, Miigwech.
Thank you for those words. And when she says Waban Tribal Council, she's not alluding to myself. I'm a representative now, but she's actually alluding to our executive director, Jason Batiste, and the former executive director, Sean Batiste, which is his brother, and their father, Barney. We're really at the foundation of doing that advocacy work and ensuring that our communities weren't being overlooked when it came to resource development, and were being adequately resourced to participate in a genuine, meaningful way. And if I could add to this question, so going back is how to learn about two-eyed seeing and how it can apply. Being non-Indigenous myself, I come from an environmental, ecological kind of background. I mean, if you live in Timmins and you're not outdoorsy and you're not fishing and hunting and doing something, like, why are you living in Timmins? Like, to get eaten by black flies and mosquitoes? Like, I don't understand, right? So it's not really hard to see how to apply the two-eyed seeing concept from people who live in the Timmins area, you know, born and raised, and who enjoy the outdoors, who can understand that interconnectedness to the land. You're a part of that world as well, right? We as humans think we're all super special, and no, you're not. You're alive. You're an animal on this planet. Sorry to say, but so that's just my tidbit. Is just remember that you are going into a community who is closely tied to the land and are, you know, concerned about impacts and things of the like, but reasonably so, and understand that there is a balance to be found there with those two perspectives. So I'm looking at the time now. We've got 15 minutes left, guys. We've got one last question, and I think is really what I wanted to drive the point home here, is I'm going to ask the panelists, what do you think are the key takeaways from today's discussion about two-eyed seeing? What do you want the audience members to go home, you know, knowing and sharing with, you know, fellow colleagues and other community members?
I can start. I would say, like, and especially on the partnership side, that's where my lens is mainly focused. But I would say, like, listening and learning, that number one, and then and coming with zero assumptions on the way things are done. That's where we have our biggest struggles where like maybe a proponent comes in, this is the way we do things, this is the way it's always been done. Unfortunately, that hasn't worked for us historically. We do things a different way. It might change week to week as we discover better practices or learn something new. So just coming with no assumptions, more or less adhering to the way we want to do business. That's the first step in bridging a part of that gap anyway.
I'll backpack on that as well. The listening and learning is huge in the lands department when it comes to engaging with the community and their histories and stories and their values, and knowing to, we try to protect those values really heavily. And yeah.
So for myself, what I would like everyone here to do that's thinking of approaching a First Nation is first engage with them, listen to what they have to say, and get involved, get to know their staff. Like I said earlier, relationships are big for us. And then once you do decide that engagement's what you're going to do towards that step, in self-reflect before you actually approach the First Nation. How can you approach us with an open mind and accept new concepts that you're not familiar with to be able to build that relationship with the First Nation? And because we're looking again at that relationship that lasts way past the mine. And I do have to say there are some times that we see when we're engaging with industry that we go through the whole process on how we're looking to collaborate with them. Then it comes time to seeing how they approach the bidding process, and it's like nothing was actually comprehended, and it's like they just met with us to tick a box. And that's not what we're looking for. We're looking for relationships. We're looking for how we can collaborate and remain partners for well after the mine, and not just for one particular project. For if you're a part of another project, we'd like to have employees or members take part in that as well. So just keeping an open mind, be innovative to approach us when it comes to engagement.
Yeah, absolutely. The whole, I think it's one thing, they have like a spidey sense. If you're coming in with just that mentality of just looking to check a box and you're not genuine with your relationship building, they'll spot it from a mile away. And it's just really not, the best way to approach the community to try to get your project moving forward. Chief, did you have anything to say?
Yeah, just to repeat, sorry.
Key takeaways.
Okay, so
Key takeaways.
Understanding whose territory you are in, recognizing that you need to have that relationship, and that we are people. We have our own ways of being. Each of us have our own different priorities. And I think that once you do come into the community, anybody who has, you start to get to know the people. And the other thing is too, and I think from industry's perspective, we've been saying it for the last 100 years, you are in our territory, that you are supposed to be involving us, that it is a sharing treaty, but that you now have the opportunity to change the course and honor your own ancestors as well, so that you can make right what the intention was when we did sign a treaty. From our perspective, and Nicole had alluded to that earlier, we're looking at securing a future for our future generations from Matagami, but we also have to do so by honoring our ancestors in our territory who saw the opportunity when they signed a treaty, but who were woefully neglected. And you now have that opportunity to make right what your ancestors did not honor. So you have that opportunity to be honoring, the intention of that. So I'm not trying to flip anything around. I really do think that there is an opportunity there, and that you can be the upstanding treaty partners of, and do a better job of representing our territories.
Very, very well said, Chief.
Miigwech.
So
Key takeaways, Trent.
my key takeaway for today's discussion would be that First Nations have the right to maintain and apply holistic worldviews. So we aren't asking permission to do that, it's already a part of who we are.
Yeah.
Excellent point.
Yeah, I think, the key foundation here is just based on, meaningful relationship. And that's, the key factor for living a life as an Indigenous person, right? And when factoring in that two-eyed seeing component, like we were, from our perspective, pretty much like, forced to see the Western view and incorporate that into our everyday lives, right? Where on, like, let's just say on the other side, it's now an opportunity for you to learn and be part of, the knowledge that we hold. And we're very open to having these conversations. It's one of the, the favorite things that, my favorite things I get to do with the work that I do is be able to get out there and talk to people and share perspective. And, nations all across Canada now, or all across the Americas, as Jen would put it, are well versed in this two-eyed seeing concept and are able to, navigate the space fairly well. And, just concluding comments here, project development and, moving forward, fast tracking, that's, it's not done through legislation and deregulation. This is done through partnership based on meaningful relationships. And, I'll just kind of leave it at that. I just want to say Chimigwich to everybody for being here today and listening. And again, always open for a conversation to carry this a little bit deeper.
And thank you, Nicole, for facilitating this. I just want to say I'm really proud of the members that we have representing here. I think that this is a real indication of our future and how vibrant it is going to be for Matagami. So, Miigwech.